So I am not going on social media for a month, and I decided I was gonna do this after I interviewed 2 people from past generations who were 60 years old, and I interviewed people from Generation Z who are my age, 1920. So I had to write a news article for my class, and I was on the bus one day and there were these 2 people in front of me, and they were talking about kind of like the mental battle and like change that they were going through once they turned 20. They kind of had this epiphany like, oh my god, my life is starting. And that's anyone kind of ever, right? And you're like, that's normal, that's normal. But I was like, I want to see what past generations actually have to say about this and what their experience was like when they were 20 years old. And at the end of the day, the biggest difference between 20-year-olds now and 20-year-olds then is the amount of access we have into each other's life. And you might be wondering, like, is this a problem? Like, what do you mean by this? Well, I had an epiphany when I saw this video on TikTok, and it was this guy who said, ironic that it's on TikTok, that he deleted all social media forever after he saw the top of Mount Everest. Why, you may ask? He said that he didn't feel worthy to see the top of Mount Everest when somebody had worked their ass off of like blood, sweat, and tears to get there, and he was living vicariously through him. And it's almost like seeing so many amounts of success stories and just so many experiences in general on social media. I was wondering, at what point does that diminish the actual craving and drive to experience something for yourself? And I got my question answered when I interviewed these 2 6-year-olds who had no idea what was going on in LA. They didn't even know what was going on an hour away from them in town, because they lived in a town with literally one television station. And on the surface, you're like, yeah, it's obvious, like, we have more technology. But in that difference, I found that 20-year-olds nowadays have more of a crisis of like identity and feeling like they're behind. And I thought that was 100% going to be the case for the older generations, but they said it wasn't really that monumental of a change because they had a focus path forward. Like, they weren't exposed to the amount of options nowadays, which are honestly dizzying. It almost makes your path feel more unclear with so much possibility and opportunity. This kind of all stemmed from role models in your 20s, having somebody that can like provide you direction, and not necessarily somebody you want to become, but somebody who inspires you and just shows you that the level of success that they've achieved is just possible. But you don't really necessarily want to be them, you know what I mean? And one of the 6-year-olds told me that when he was 20, he worked for a man whose name was on gas stations across New Brunswick. Mr. Irving, you might have heard of it himself. And he said that his interactions with Irving gave him enough motivation and drive to just aspire for something in his 20s, and that gave him direction. And it's like, now we're exposed to 100 voices a day, when it's like then that like a voice was so sacred. And what's really come from seeing and listening to 100 voices a day that every single one of my Gen Z interviewees told me was comparison, comparison, comparison. I asked the older generations about comparison, and they were like, we never really had that like level of comparison that you guys have now. There was also just not really the vast amount of people to even compare yourself to. Like, they said that, like, when he had this conversation with Mr. Irving, that was iconic. It was iconic because there was nothing else to compare it to. And now social media has kind of, I feel like subconsciously or not, like made comparison almost a habitual thing, whether you're comparing yourself to their life, like, oh, they have it so good, or like they have such a great life, like I wish I was going to that event, or like I wish I didn't have this struggle, whatever. But I feel like it also makes us compare celebrities to each other. And celebrities was a really big topic in my interview as well. Celebrities weren't somebody people followed back then. At least not what they told me. They said that if you wanted to be a singer, like you might look up to Madonna or like the Bee Gees, and they would kind of like be your role model. But their role models were only people that were tangible, people that were directly in front of them, like their parents, their friends, their employers. And it's funny because when I interviewed Gen Z, I was really expecting them to say like their role models or mentors, people like that gave them direction, were people they found on social media, and they really didn't talk about that. But then when I asked them to talk about their mentors, I kid you not, they talked about it for maybe 5 minutes. Oh, my parents like inspire me to like be hardworking, like whatever. Barely going into depth, right? I interviewed 4 people. And then I asked them the question of social media. Guys, they went on for like 15 to 20 minutes, and it was, some of them said that it provided them like some level of opportunity, but the amount of negative things they told me about the amount of access that they have to social media and it making them like compare their life to theirs, and that's why they feel behind that they're 20, is so much louder than the good part of social media. Because my question was kind of like, to what extent is seeing somebody's life on social media actually making us go out and get our own dream? And that's kind of why I'm doing this challenge, because I just realized like there's no reason that I need to see this much into somebody's life. Like past generations, because they didn't have technology, they didn't know what was going on in the world. And they said in their 20s they had this, like, they weren't overwhelmed, they didn't feel dizzy, they felt focused, and like less hate as well. But anyways, that's kind of my interview process. It's a great article. If you guys want me to share this news article when I'm finished, let me know. But I'm doing this challenge for myself. I don't even want to call it a challenge because this should not be a challenge, but I'm doing this for myself because I want to be a writer, and I am a writer. And I was just picturing my dream life, and it's me writing hours a day, and I was like, where does my phone come into play at all in this? And I kind of knew, like, when I wanted to pursue this dream, like, evidently I'm going to give up this level of comfortability that I have, like, oh, if I'm bored, if I'm waiting in line, like, I can kind of just like check my phone. And I was like, I don't even see the point of that anymore. You see inspirational videos and, right, you save them thinking you're gonna go back, and then you don't go back. And I couldn't even tell you what I remember from even like scrolling on my phone. So when I was picturing my dream life, I was just like, this isn't even a part of it. Like, in fact, seeing this much on social media and not even really seeing any like benefactor really put it into perspective for me. I'm gonna film this week by week in my experience. So if you wanna follow along, subscribe.